So for this week, I'm going to do something slightly different than what I did last week. Whereas last week I spoke a lot in Turkish, this week I'm going to speak more about Turkish and about the language in general and just what I've learned this week through watching videos and reading articles. So to start things off, I saw this quote on the internet by this guy, and I feel like it summarizes a lot of how I feel about Turkish. And it's that Turkish isn't difficult to learn, but it's difficult to use. And I feel like that's so true, largely due in part to two different things. To start, Turkish is a subject-object-verb language, whereas English, Spanish, and French are all subject-verb-object languages. So just the way that you have to think about things is just so different. And it's not that hard to learn, but it can be hard to implement on the spot in conversation. So an example of that would be if you wanted to say, I want to go shopping. In Turkish, you would say, alışveriş yapmak istiyorum, or literally shopping to do, I want. Or in English, you might say, you bring me the book. In Turkish, the same sentence would be, bana kitabı getir, or to me the book bring, with you implied. The second thing that makes Turkish so difficult to use for an English speaker is that it's an agglutinative language, which means you pretty much just make increasingly complicated sentences or expressions by adding suffixes to the ends of verbs and nouns instead of adding like smaller words like with or stuff like that, or like pluralizing. And that can lead to these ridiculously long sentences that Turkish is actually kind of famous for. And one of the most famous of those phrases is Avrupalala iştiremediklerimizden misiniz, which is, are you one of those whom we cannot Europeanize? And just that combination of things, the subject, object, verb, and agglutinative language, make it so hard to process on the spot when you're speaking or trying to think in Turkish. And then some other things I learned this week from this one video in particular by this guy named Lang Focus, who does lots of language videos, is that Turkish comes from a completely separate language family than what you might expect. It's not Indo-European, it's not Slavic, it's not Semitic. It's from its own family called Turkic. Some of the other members of that would be Azeri Turkish, Turkmen, and Qashqai. But the one nice thing about Turkish is that it's a phonetic language, which means you always are going to know how the words sound once you get the pronunciation of the letters down. So there's that, which is pretty nice. And then one more thing I learned from that video was that Turkish actually works better with the Latin alphabet than it did with the Arabic alphabet, which is what it used during the time of the Ottoman Empire, because that's what the Ottoman Empire forced on. It kind of like forced it on the language. And the reason for that is that Arabic only has 3 short and 3 long vowels, and Turkish has more than that. So during the Ottoman Empire, literacy rates were a lot lower because just the written language didn't work that well with the spoken language. But when the Ataturk came into power, he removed a bunch of Persian and Arabic words and replaced them with just native Turk words, and then he changed the alphabet to the Latin system that it uses today with a few added letters. So the other thing I did this week was I started using my Pimsleur courses a lot more. And if you don't know, Pimsleur is pretty much audio. It's entirely audio based, and all the lessons kind of simulate conversation and teach you words and phrases as you go along. And that's actually really nice because it really, really, really helps with pronunciation and with just getting comfortable trying to speak the language. And I actually feel like my memory retention is better with Pimsleur than it is with Duolingo, which is really surprising to me because I've always kind of thought I learned best by reading. But the one downside of it is, compared to Duolingo, is I feel like I get through a lot less content with Pimsleur than I did with Duolingo, although it's easier for me to remember what I learned in the Pimsleur courses. And the third major thing this week was that my dad showed my Turkish video from last week where I spoke Turkish to this Turkish woman who works at his office with him in New York, and she gave me some feedback on my spoken section, and she said that it sounded great, which was pretty nice to hear. And then she also recommended me a few Turkish TV shows to watch, because she saw the part where I was complaining about Limon and Ali and always having to, like, not having that many sources compared to other languages. And she recommended 3 shows. Muntazam Yüzyıl, which means Magnificent Century, and she said it was inspired by the life of the reigning sultan at the height of the Ottoman Empire. Second one was Aşk-ı Memnu, which is Forbidden Love, which is apparently based on an old Turkish novel. And the third one was Hatırla Sevgili, Remember Darling, which is a love story with recent Turkish political history as backdrop. And she said there are various others. I looked up Muntazam Yüzyıl, the Magnificent Century one, because it was the one that interested me the most based on her description. And I actually found it on YouTube, so once I move up from Limon and Ali, then I'll hopefully be able to move on to that. And she said there's actually a bunch of others, because media has become a key export sector for Turkey in recent years. So hopefully if I start looking a bit more, I suppose, like going off of Netflix, I should be able to find more sources. But yeah, that was pretty much it for this week. I didn't actually do as much dueling this week, but like I said, I started doing Pimsleur a lot more, and that was nice because with the audio thing, I could just keep it on for 30 minutes and do it while I was shoveling snow, because we got a ton of snow this week.